Evelyn sat quietly in the bustling Chicago O'Hare Airport lounge, her fingers nervously drumming on her leather bag. At 65, she felt out of place among the travelers half her age. This trip to the Midwest was supposed to be her escape, a desperate attempt to break free from the solitude that had consumed her since her husband passed 2 years ago. But the loneliness had followed her here, refusing to loosen its grip. As she shifted uncomfortably in her chair, a young man entered the lounge, his confidence drawing her attention. He was tall, with a bright smile that seemed to light up the room. Evelyn noticed how effortlessly he interacted with the staff and other travelers, his charm evident in every gesture. When their eyes met, Ryder's expression softened, and he walked over. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his deep voice warm and inviting. "Do you need help with your bag?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment before nodding. She'd been struggling with the oversized suitcase since leaving the hotel, but her pride had stopped her from asking for assistance. "Thank you," she said softly, as Ryder hoisted the bag onto his shoulder with ease. "I didn't want to trouble anyone," she said. "It's no trouble," Ryder replied with a grin. "It's part of my job as a tour guide. Are you here for the Chicago City tour?" Evelyn nodded again, surprised by his intuition. "Yes, I am. It's my first time visiting Chicago. I've always wanted to visit, but life got in the way." Ryder studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Well, you're here now. That's what matters." They fell into easy conversation as they waited for their respective groups to be called. Ryder spoke about his work as a guide, his dreams of one day starting his own tour company. Evelyn found herself drawn to his enthusiasm and ambition. He seemed so full of life, so sure of his place in the world. It was a stark contrast to the emptiness she'd been feeling. "And you, Ryder?" Evelyn asked, breaking her reverie. "What brought you here?" Ryder's expression softened. "I've always loved this city," he said. "I love showing people its hidden gems." Evelyn hesitated, unsure how to respond. How could she put into words the ache of losing her husband, the endless days spent alone in a house that no longer felt like home? Instead, she offered a small smile. "I suppose I wanted an adventure." Ryder nodded, as if he understood more than she was saying. "Chicago is full of adventure, you'll see," Ryder said with a smile as they parted ways. "Maybe we'll meet again. The world has a funny way of bringing people together." Evelyn watched him go, feeling a strange flutter in her chest. She shook her head, chastising herself for her foolishness. He was young, vibrant, and full of possibilities, and yet for the first time in years, she felt something within her, a faint glimmer of excitement, a flicker of hope. The open streets of Chicago stretched endlessly as the tour bus bounced along the uneven road. Evelyn sat in the back seat, her camera in hand, marveling at the vastness of the cityscape. Ryder, seated in the driver's seat, glanced at her through the rearview mirror and smiled. "You'll want to keep your camera ready," he said, his voice carrying over the hum of the engine. "This area is known for its iconic landmarks." Evelyn adjusted her hat and aimed the lens toward the horizon. "It's incredible," she murmured. "I've never seen anything like that," Ryder chuckled. "That's the magic of Chicago. It has a way of surprising you when you least expect it." The bus came to a stop, and Ryder hopped out, extending a hand to help Evelyn. The touch was brief, but she noticed the warmth of his skin and the ease of his strength. Together, they walked toward a scenic overlook, where the Chicago skyline stretched out before them. As the afternoon stretched on, their conversation grew more personal. Evelyn found herself sharing fragments of her life she rarely discussed. She told Ryder about her years as a teacher, the joy she found in shaping young minds, and the emptiness that followed her retirement. Ryder listened intently, nodding in understanding. "You know," he said, leaning against the railing, "when I was younger, I always thought life would get easier with age. But hearing you talk, I realize the challenges just change." Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's not the years that weigh you down. It's the things you lose along the way." The honesty in her words lingered between them. Ryder looked away, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I lost my father when I was 15, he admitted. "It's why I started working so young, to take care of my family," Ryder said, his voice filled with a mix of sadness and determination. Evelyn hadn't expected such vulnerability, but it deepened her respect for him. "You've done well for yourself, Ryder," she said. "It's not easy to face life's hardships and still carry yourself with such grace." His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink around them. There was no age, no cultural divide, just two people connecting over shared pain and resilience. The spell was broken when Ryder's phone buzzed. He answered quickly, speaking in a low tone. Evelyn turned away, focusing on the Chicago skyline, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had shifted. Later, as the group gathered around the hotel lobby, Evelyn noticed Ryder's easy camaraderie with the others. He laughed and joked, his charm effortlessly pulling people in. Yet, when his eyes found hers across the room, there was a softness in his gaze that seemed meant only for her. When the night grew cold, Ryder offered her his jacket. "You'll need this," he said simply. Evelyn hesitated before accepting it, her fingers brushing against his. The small gesture sent a ripple through her, a reminder of the warmth she hadn't felt in years. As she lay in her hotel bed at night, Evelyn stared at the ceiling, her heart heavy with confusion. She hadn't come here looking for anything beyond adventure, and yet Ryder's presence was stirring something inside her, a longing she couldn't quite name. The city was quiet, outside her window, under the canopy of city lights. Ryder approached Evelyn with a careful smile, holding a tray with 2 cups of coffee. She looked up from her book, startled but not displeased. "I thought you might enjoy this," he said, placing the tray on the small table between them. Evelyn hesitated for a moment before accepting the cup he offered. "This is thoughtful," she said softly, her voice almost drowned by the hum of the city. "You've been quiet today," Ryder observed, leaning back in his chair, his gaze lingering on her face, studying the lines of experience and grace that age had etched there. "I've had a lot on my mind," Evelyn admitted, swirling the coffee in her cup. "This trip has been different from what I expected," Evelyn said. "Different good or different bad?" Ryder asked, his tone light, but his eyes searching. "Good," she said quickly, then paused. "But complicated." Ryder didn't press her, allowing the silence to stretch comfortably between them. The city lights cast a warm glow on their faces, softening the sharp edges of reality. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn finally said, breaking the quiet. "Anything," Ryder replied without hesitation. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life, like the person you were supposed to be got lost somewhere along the way?" Ryder thought for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I used to, after my father died. I felt trapped by responsibility, like my dreams didn't matter anymore. But then I realized something. The life you want doesn't just find you, you have to fight for it." Evelyn nodded slowly, his words resonating with her. "I envy that clarity. I've spent so much time being what others needed me to be, a wife, a mother, a teacher. I don't know who I am outside of those roles." Ryder's expression softened. "You're more than the roles you play," he said. Ryder's voice was firm. "You're here exploring the world. That takes courage." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Evelyn felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. The walls she had built around herself began to crack, letting in the warmth of his presence. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand on his. The touch was brief but electric, sending a jolt through both of them. Ryder didn't pull away, his gaze steady and unreadable. "I shouldn't have done that," Evelyn said, pulling her hand back quickly, her cheeks flushing. "Why not?" Ryder asked gently, his voice low. "Because it's inappropriate," she whispered, looking down at her glass. "Inappropriate doesn't mean wrong," Ryder said, leaning closer. "Sometimes the things we're told not to want are the things we need most." Evelyn's breath caught as his words hung in the air. Slowly, Ryder reached out, his fingers brushing against hers again. This time, she didn't pull away. The world seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them in the glow of the city lights. When Ryder leaned in, Evelyn's heart raced, but she didn't stop him. Their lips met in a tentative kiss, soft and hesitant at first, but deepening with each passing second. It was a moment of surrender, an acknowledgement of something that had been building between them since the day they met. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn's eyes were filled with tears she couldn't explain. Ryder reached up and gently wiped one away, his touch tender. "You're allowed to feel," he said quietly. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Evelyn didn't respond, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she felt alive. The journey back to the city was filled with a silence that spoke louder than words. Evelyn stared out of the window, watching the Chicago skyline give way to smaller neighborhoods and eventually the outskirts of the city. Ryder occasionally glanced at her, but neither of them addressed what had happened the night before. At the hotel, Ryder helped her with her luggage for what felt like the last time. Their eyes met briefly, and Evelyn opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Ryder gave her a small, understanding smile and stepped back, allowing her the space to process. Later that evening, Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. A message from her daughter, Claire, popped up. "Call me when you can." She sighed and pressed the call button, dreading the conversation she knew was inevitable. "Hi, Mom," Claire's voice came through, sharp but concerned. "How's the trip?" "It's been eye-opening," Evelyn replied, cautiously. Claire hesitated before speaking again. "I've been worried about you. I know this trip was supposed to help you heal, but something feels off. Are you okay?" Evelyn's grip tightened on the phone. She wanted to tell Claire everything, the loneliness, the unexpected connection with Ryder, the kiss that had shaken her to her core. But how could she explain something she barely understood herself? "I'm fine, Claire," she said instead, her voice steady but distant. "You don't need to worry about me." After the call, Evelyn felt restless. She wandered to the hotel balcony, where the city lights stretched out before her. The cool night air did little to calm her racing thoughts. She had made choices during this trip that defied every expectation she had set for herself. She wasn't sure if she regretted them, but she knew they had changed her. The next morning, Ryder arrived at the hotel to escort her to the airport. The ride was quiet, but there was no tension between them, only an unspoken understanding. When they arrived, Ryder stepped out to help her with her luggage one last time. As they stood at the curb, Evelyn finally found her voice. "Thank you, Ryder, for everything." Ryder looked at her, his expression warm but bittersweet. "You don't have to thank me. You've taught me as much as I've taught you." Evelyn smiled, but her eyes betrayed the sadness she felt. "I don't know what happens next." "Neither do I," Ryder admitted. "But that's life, isn't it? We just have to keep moving forward." Before she could second-guess herself, Evelyn reached out and hugged him. It was a brief embrace, but it carried the weight of all the things they couldn't say. When they pulled apart, Ryder stepped back, giving her a small wave as she walked into the terminal. On the plane, Evelyn sat by the window, her mind replaying moments from the trip. The laughter, the conversations, the kiss, they were memories she would carry with her forever. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt a quiet sense of resolve. Back home, Evelyn began writing letters to Claire. They were honest, raw accounts of her life, her grief, and her journey toward rediscovery. She didn't mention Ryder by name, but his presence was woven into every word. Months later, she came across an article online about a young Chicago entrepreneur who had started a successful tour company. The accompanying photo showed Ryder standing proudly in front of a Chicago cityscape, his bright smile and sparkling eyes taking her breath away. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat as she read the article, her mind racing with memories of their time together. She smiled, feeling a sense of joy and wonder that she hadn't felt in years.